Imagine for a moment that you're living over 3,000 years ago among the people of Israel. The rules for living in society and for relating to God were very different from what we know today. God, in His perfect holiness, cannot exist with mistakes, disobedience, what the Bible calls sin. But human beings, as we well know, are not perfect. They make mistakes, sometimes without meaning to. To solve this big problem, God set up a clever and very visual system, the sacrificial system. This wasn't a cruel punishment, but rather a temporary solution, a teaching tool for the Israelites to understand how serious sin was and why it needed to be fixed. This system was at the very heart of their spiritual life. It took place in a central location, the tabernacle, a kind of sacred tent, and later the temple in Jerusalem. Sacrifices weren't just empty rituals, they were a real-life show of a deep spiritual truth. When an Israelite made a mistake, even by accident, they broke their connection with God. The sacrifice then came to fix that connection. It was kind of like a process to follow to fix a mistake. By offering an animal, the person admitted their mistake, showed their desire to say sorry, and accepted the solution God Himself had offered to get forgiveness and make peace with Him. It was an act of doing what God said and having faith. This system had another very important job. It constantly reminded the people that sin has a price. To really understand, let's look at a specific example in the Bible. In the book of Leviticus chapter 4. This passage explains in detail the process to follow when an Israelite sinned by accident, meaning they didn't mean to cause harm or disobey. Let's take the case of a regular person. The first step was realizing what they did. The person knew they made a mistake. They couldn't just ignore it. They then had to choose an animal from their flock, a goat or a sheep without any flaws, and bring it to the entrance of the tabernacle. Choosing a perfect animal was super important. It showed that you were giving God your very best, and that only what is perfect can cover up what's not perfect. Once they were in front of the priest, a very symbolic moment happened. The person who had sinned placed their hand on the animal's head. This wasn't just a small thing. It was an act of showing they were connected. By doing this, the person was symbolically putting their sin, their guilt, onto the animal. It was like they were saying, "This animal is taking my place. It will suffer the result of my mistake." Then came the hardest part, the sacrifice itself. The person who brought the animal had to kill it. The priest then collected the animal's blood. This is where the priest's job became really important. He acted as a go-between for the people and God. With the blood, he went to the altar of sacrifices, a big bronze structure where the fire burned all the time. For us, living in the 21st century, this ritual might seem very far away. But if we look closer, every part of this process is full of strong meaning, like puzzle pieces that make a bigger picture. First, let's talk about the animal. It had to be perfect. Why? Because it stood for a perfect and innocent replacement. An imperfect creature couldn't pay for someone else's imperfection. This innocent animal, which had done nothing wrong, died in the place of the guilty person. This is the idea of substitution. Next, there's the blood. Throughout the Bible, blood means life. The book of Leviticus says it very clearly, the life of the flesh is in the blood. Leviticus 17 verse 11. That's why blood was so important in the sacrifice. Pouring it or sprinkling it on the altar meant that a life had been given. Sin, being a break with the God of life, brings death. The blood of the sacrifice showed that this consequence happened, but on the substitute. Finally, there's the priest. What was his exact job? He was the go-between, the important link. An ordinary Israelite couldn't go directly into God's holy presence. There was a barrier, a curtain, because of sin. The priest was the one set apart, made special, to bridge the gap between God and people. He was the one who took the blood, the result of the sacrifice, and presented it to God in the right way. These three symbols, the innocent animal, the spilled blood, and the mediating priest, worked together in a way that couldn't be separated. Centuries later, when Jesus shows up in history, the New Testament writers use these symbols to explain who He is and what He did. They show Him as the perfect fulfillment. First, Jesus is shown as the Lamb of God. John the Baptist says, "Behold the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world." For a first-century Jew, this was clear. It points to the thousands of lambs sacrificed at the temple. But a major difference, this lamb takes away the sin of the world, once and for all. He is the perfect and innocent substitute. His death on the cross equals the final sacrifice. The writer to the Hebrews says, "The blood of bulls and goats could not take away sins. It only covered them. Jesus' blood, however, cleanses our conscience." His death is not an accident but the ultimate sacrificial act given willingly. His blood paid the debt of humanity's sin. He fulfills what Leviticus requires. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. Animal sacrifices were just the shadow. His death is the reality. And the priest, Jesus, also fulfills that higher role. Hebrews calls him the high priest. The ancient priests were sinners and had to offer for themselves. Jesus is the perfect priest without sin. So what does all this mean for us today in 2025? The first big thing it means is huge. Forgiveness for our mistakes is now fully open to us for free. We don't need to bring an animal to the temple anymore, which, by the way, isn't even there anymore. We don't need to follow a complicated ritual to fix our wrongs. Jesus' sacrifice on the cross was so complete, so perfect, that it paid the debt for everyone who trusts in him. It's kind of like if someone had a huge debt at the bank, impossible to pay back, and an incredibly rich helper comes along and pays the whole amount, not with money, but with his own life. The debt is gone. All that's left is to accept this gift. The second thing this changes is how we can reach God. In the Old Testament, a thick curtain separated the holy place from the most holy place in the temple, where God's presence lived. Only the high priest could go behind this curtain, just once a year. It was a constant reminder of the separation caused by sin. At the very moment Jesus died on the cross, the temple curtain tore in two from top to bottom. The meaning is powerful. The way to God is now wide open. Thanks to Jesus' sacrifice, our high priest, we don't need a human go-between anymore. We can go straight to God with confidence, like a child goes to their dad. This also frees us from fear and guilt. The door is open. All you have to do is walk through it.